Let's discuss the process of diffusion of innovations. Before we do that in details, what does the concept of innovation mean? The term innovation can be defined based on consumer perceptions, as any idea, practice, or material artifact perceived to be new by the relevant adopting unit. What are the categories of innovation? Under this conception, 3 categories of innovation are classified thus. 1. Continuous innovations. 2. Dynamically continuous innovations. 3. Discontinuous innovations. Now, let's explain them. Continuous innovations have the least disrupting influence on established consumption patterns. Product alteration is involved, rather than the establishment of a totally new product. An example of continuous innovation is evident in the continual refinement of smartphones, as manufacturers release new models annually, incorporating slightly enhanced specifications and improved designs. Now, dynamically continuous innovations have more disrupting effects than do continuous innovations, although they do not generally alter established patterns. These may involve the creation of new products or the alteration of existing items. Lastly, discontinuous innovations involve the establishment of new products with new behavior patterns. Examples of these situations would include electric vehicles, EVs, and streaming media like Spotify or Netflix, which is opposed to previous model of vehicles and ways of accessing music and movies. Now, let's discuss consumer adoption process. The acceptance and continued use of a product or brand by an individual is referred to as adoption. Adoption model consists of the following stages. Stage 1, awareness. At this stage the potential adopter finds out about the existence of a product but has very little information and no well-formed attitudes about it. Stage 2, comprehension. This stage represents the consumers having knowledge and understanding of what the product is and can do. Stage 3, attitude. Here, the consumer develops favorable or unfavorable behavioral predispositions toward the product. Termination of the adoption process is likely at this stage if attitudes are not favorable toward the product. Stage 4, legitimating. Here, the consumer becomes convinced that the product should be adopted. Stage 5, trial. If possible, the consumer tests or tries the product to determine its utility. Trial may take place cognitively, that is, whereby the individual vicariously uses the product in a hypothetical situation, or it may be actually used in a limited or total way, depending on the innovation's nature. Stage 6, adoption. At this stage, the consumer determines whether or not to use the product in a full-scale way. Continued purchase and/or use of the item fulfill the adoption process. Some consumers pass through these stages early in a product life while others may do so much later. In addition, the adoption process describes consumers who are actively involved in thinking about and considering a product. Now, what is the significance of the adoption process? The significance of the adoption process to marketers is in twofold. First, not all consumers pass through the adoption process with the same speed. Some move swiftly, while others proceed more slowly. Second, the marketer's communication forms vary in their effectiveness over the different stages in the adoption process. These points can be important in assisting the marketer to develop an effective promotional program. It has been found, for example, for early stages of the adoption process, the mass media appear to be most effective in creating awareness. Thus, the marketer would design awareness and interest-generating messages to be transmitted by such impersonal sources. At later stages in the adoption process, however, personal sources of information appear to become more important, so the marketer would desire to have effective personal selling and word-of-mouth communications at these points. This indicates then, that as consumers move through the adoption process, the amount of mass media advertising might be decreased while the amount of personal selling is increased. Now let's talk about the process of diffusion. Perhaps, the best marketing-oriented definition of the diffusion process is the adoption of new products and services over time by consumer within social making when a new product is involved. The diffusion process is the manner in which innovation spread throughout a market. The term spread refers to purchase behavior in which the product is purchased with some degree of regularity. No matter which innovation is being studied or which social group is involved, the diffusion process appears to follow a similar pattern over time. At this point, let's discuss the categories of adopters and innovators. Innovators are venturesome risk-takers. They are capable of absorbing the financial and social costs of adopting an unsuccessful product. They are cosmopolitan in outlook and use other innovators rather than local peers as a reference group. They tend to be younger, better educated, and more socially mobile than their peers. Innovators make extensive use of commercial media, sales personnel, and professional sources in learning of new products. Categories of adopters. 1. Early adopters. Early adopters tend to be opinion leaders in local reference groups. They are successful, well-educated, and somewhat younger than their peers. They are willing to take a calculated risk on an innovation but are concerned with failure. Early adopters also use commercial, professional, and interpersonal information sources, and they provide information to others. 2. Early majority. Early majority consumers tend to be cautious with respect to innovations. They adopt sooner than most of their social group but also after the innovation that has proven successful with others. They are socially active but seldom leaders. They tend to be somewhat older, less well-educated, and less socially mobile than the early adopters. The early majority relies heavily on interpersonal sources of information. 3. Late majority. Late majority members are skeptical about innovations. They often adopt more in response to social pressures or a decreased availability of the previous product than because of a positive evaluation of the innovation. They tend to be older and have less social status and mobility than those who adopt earlier. 4. Laggards. They are locally oriented and engage in limited social interaction. They tend to be relatively dogmatic and oriented toward the past. Innovations are adopted only with reluctance. What factors affect the spread of innovation? The rate at which an innovation is diffused is a function of 10 factors. They are: 1. Type of group. Some groups are more accepting of change than others. In general, young, affluent, and highly educated groups accept change, including new products, readily. 2. Type of decision. The type of decision refers to an individual versus a group decision. The fewer individuals involved in the purchase decision, the more rapidly an innovation will spread. Therefore, innovations likely to involve 2 or more household members will generally spread slower than innovations that affect primarily on individual. 3. Marketing effort. The rate of diffusion is heavily influenced by the extent of marketing effort involved. Thus, the rate of diffusion is not completely beyond the control of the firm. 4. Fulfillment of felt need. The more manifest or obvious the need that the innovation satisfies, the faster the diffusion. 5. Compatibility. The more the purchase and use of the innovation is consistent with the individual's and group's values or beliefs, the more rapid the diffusion. 6. Relative advantage. The better the innovation is perceived to meet the relevant need compared to existing methods, the more rapid the diffusion. 7. Complexity. The more difficult the innovation is to understand and use, the slower the diffusion. The key to this dimension is ease of use, not complexity of product. 8. Observability. The more easily consumers can observe the positive effects of adopting an innovation, the more rapid its diffusion will be. 9. Trialability. The easier it is to have low-cost or low-risk trial of the innovation, the more rapid its diffusion. 10. Perceived risk. The more risk associated with trying an innovation, the slower the diffusion. Risk can be financial, physical, or social. Perceived risk is a function of 3 dimensions. 1. The probability that the innovation will not perform as desired. 2. The consequences of its not performing as desired. 3. The ability to reverse, and the cost of reversing, any negative consequences. I trust that you have gained an in-depth understanding as concerning the process of diffusion of innovations. If you like these videos, please give it a thumb up so that others will see it. Also, remember to subscribe if you have not done so. Until next time, keep learning.